Bible study done simple. Here on this channel, we'll be doing a topical Bible study, verse by verse, cataloged and in order. This project will take years, but we will eventually have an auditory and visual version of a study Bible that we can use as a reference, as well as be used as a tool for learners who may not be inclined to reading as much. In particular, I'm going to be going over to start a section on the fruits of the Spirit and going through each fruit of the Spirit as I go for the whole Bible as a topical Bible study. Now, love alone is probably going to take me all year, so um, I'm really interested to see. I believe that God is really going to change in me, and uh, just spending a year focusing on each of the fruits of the Spirit, I think is going to be spiritually very, I think, healthy and life bringing. But I do aim to make as few doctrinal hardline statements as I can. Rather, I'd like to provide a very non-denominational reading of what is in the text, what its context is, any background info that's needed to properly understand the text, as well as possibly use some commentaries from various denominations, depending on what I can get my hands on. If you have any relevant additional information, please reach out, drop a comment, or send me an email. Said I continue to build this library. I'll do my best to have any sources or other relevant information in the description, but I'm neither a robot nor a scholar, so I'm quite sure there will be mistakes. Please bear with me. But I do hope that this will bless you as it's already doing to me. Um, what I can say is after the first week of studying love through Genesis, I feel like that's really dug to light, brought to the surface. A lot of ways in my life where I perhaps misunderstand God's love or I'm struggling with God's love that I didn't really realize until I started going through this section here. But what I will say is last week we went through Genesis. Now, from Genesis to Deuteronomy, there are 60 instances and in 55 verses of love. Now, in the last video, I broke down what those all would be in terms of categories. So to remind you, the category of love of a parent to a child, the love of God, as well as how often does the Bible call it steadfast love. There was a specific word that we were going over. We'll go over it again, as well as I have great news. I realized why the word study wasn't functioning on my iPad when it works just fine on my phone, and that's because I hadn't signed into my account on Logos on my iPad. So if you set up an account with Logos, it's totally free. But with the account, you actually gain access to a lot more resources than you do if you just download the app and start using it. So I highly recommend not only um, downloading Logos, but setting up an account with an email. It's totally free. And then once you have that set up, you can go in and use a lot more of the tools. It's a lot more powerful. Um, so to continue here, what I've done is in the range, just to show you guys that you can do this, you can actually set up custom ranges. So like last time, we were doing the law, and in the law, 60 results in 55 verses. But what I've done here is set up a special range to filter out all of Genesis since we went through all of Genesis already. So what we do here is all you have to do is tap the range, tap add reference, and then say Exodus, Leviticus, and so on and so forth. Then you can name it, and then whenever you name that, oh, it does not like the Apple Pencil. So name, and then tap back. So our name here from Exodus to Leviticus, done. It'll show us 8 results in 7 verses, which is actually going to be super helpful as I go through this whole thing to have custom ranges. So that way I can do this in sections that are very easy. As well as if you want to just focus on a specific book, you can add a custom range that's just one book and then go from there. But what we're going to go through today, or at least start, is the Exodus through Deuteronomy section. Uh, and let's just jump in. So the first one here for love, it's steadfast love again. So it's in Exodus 15:13. So we're going to tap that, head on over. And so you'll see here that we are in the Song of Moses. So the Song of Moses basically takes place right after the parting of the Red Sea, right? Where the angel of God, Jesus, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved before them and stood behind them, coming from between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was a cloud in the darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. Moses stretched out his hand to the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry land. And then, nope, you don't need to highlight that. I am enjoying Logos, but not right now. And he stretched out his hand over the sea here in verse 27, 14:27, returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And as the Egyptians fled into it, the Lord threw the Egyptians into the midst of the sea. Jump to 30. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So we get to chapter 15, just to give a little context. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host he cast into the sea, and his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. The floods covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrow your adversaries. You send out your fury. It consumes them like stubble. In the blast of your nostrils, the water piled up, and the flood stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hands shall destroy them. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. That'll come up later. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them because the greatness of your arm. They are still as a stone. Till your people, O Lord, pass by. Till the people pass by whom you have purchased. Purchase is a great word there. You will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. So if we go back to verse 13, this steadfast love. So, not the verse, but if we highlight steadfast, see, we get the word info here now because I have an account and I'm logged in. It's really great. You tap word info, and it takes you to a full Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon. It is fantastic, super, super useful tool here. So the text is hasad, right? Steadfast love, which is a loyalty, a joint obligation, faithfulness, goodness. So last week I used the word covenant. Um, it's not totally accurate, but I think if you take it in the context of the fact that God did make a covenant with Israel, um, this whole concept of joint obligation, if I could spell, is really just this God recognizes this agreement so that he is ever faithful to uh, his loyalty, that he doesn't sway in that, and that his love is steadfast. That whenever we're reading, like I said, all the way up until Deuteronomy, the whole story, the second we see steadfast love come up, it comes up after Abram makes a covenant with God and becomes Abraham, right? So after this covenant is when we start to see steadfast love from God. And I think it's a constant callback, that word. This is just my opinion. I don't have necessarily a whole bunch of facts to back this up. Um, but it's loving kindness, right, to the needs of his creatures, as we see over here in the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. Um, so that loyalty, the loving kindness, especially in consideration that we don't see the word appear until after God has made a covenant with Israel. And during that whole first covenant there, all the way up through to Deuteronomy, um, we always see it in the context of loving kindness, or sorry, steadfast love, which I just is just really powerful to me. Um, and I think that's something that is a nature of love of God that we don't always depend on or follow through with, is that steadfast loyalty of the Lord, and that's one of the ways that He shows love. So if we continue on down the list, Exodus 26, chapter 20, verse 6. This is where we receive the Ten Commandments. I don't think I need to give a whole lot of history on this. Moses goes up to the mountain, and God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Um, you shall not take the name of your Lord God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and then rested on the seventh. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. I think that's interesting. Um, you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. Um, Interesting side note here, the thick darkness where God was. We also see in the transfiguration, Jesus' transfiguration. I want to say it's Matthew 18. Let me look it up. Don't before I make myself a liar. But let's see here. Let's open a new window here. I believe it is Matthew 18. Yeah, so who's the greatest? Parable of the lost sheep, your brother sins against you, parable of the unforgiving servant, teaching about divorce. No, I am wrong. It is not 18. All right, so hmm, I'm just going to use my phone to look it up because it's faster that way. Da, 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 da. Mount of Transfiguration, John 8. Is that right? I'm the light of the world. Truth will set you free. You're your father. I am. No. It's Matthew 17. Okay. Uh, so Matthew 17:3. Ah, I was darn close. Okay. So in Matthew 17, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John. Uh, when he was still speaking with them, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Um, I don't know. I'm not going to make any doctrinal statements. I do think it's interesting that when God's presence is with Moses, right? Um, Before the coming of the Son, right? When we still see Jesus as the angel of the Lord, which I believe. Um, when God is interacting with Moses, it is a dark cloud that is over the mountain, um, and that I don't necessarily want to make any strong statement on that, but I do think it's interesting that we see this changeover from the dark cloud in a very very similar context to a bright cloud um, overtaking him, which is just interesting to me. I'd love to research it more. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take this note down here. Um, which I might do a video on the Genesis 29 and the Genesis 24 verses that I picked up. But those I might just put under like I don't want to say a side hobby, but it might just be like a little side offshoot thing. I might start doing those in the middle of the week where I just go through anything that I researched that week. I haven't decided yet, but back to the study if it loads. All right, it's moving a little slow, but that's all right. It's got something goofy going on. That's okay. So, steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Then we go to Exodus 21:5. 21:5. Now, in this context here, we start. What's interesting here is we go from the Ten Commandments, right? So we have the Ten Commandments. Then we jump to the laws about the altars, which I think we would also recognize as super, mega, ultra important. Um, and then immediately following that, his third most important uh, notes. I'm not going to say that, we can't necessarily read into the fact that, um, I guess I am a little bit. I'm reading a little bit into the fact that, for people who just came out of slavery, right? Um, and not to get political, but people who just come out of slavery, he delivers them, he gives them the Ten Commandments, and then he says, here's the law. Now, you're going to obey and sacrifice. Then, right after getting into here's the sacrifice and here's where you're going to do it, right? He doesn't even get into the types of sacrifice yet, which is what you would think would be the next section, but it's not. He goes right to laws about slaves, right? And immediately jumps into, hey, like, this is really important. I just want to get this out of the way right now. So, you know, again, I'm not going to make a mountain out of a molehill. I just think it's really interesting that this progression here is not necessarily what you would expect at first thought of going from the commandments to the altar to not sacrifices but laws about slaves. Now, these are the rules that you shall set before them. Verse 2, when you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in the seventh he shall go out free for nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall be his slave forever. Um, I think that the love here is pretty straightforward. I think this is just so I'm not an expert here. I'm not an authority on this subject, but what I will say is, obviously we're dealing with a time when people weren't property, but people's time and energy were, right? So these are more of an indentured servitude type situation, right? Where it's you're paying for somebody's work for 7 years, basically. Well, for 6 years. It's really, see, it's tricky because in some instances, right, we see kind of a loss of autonomy, um, but we also see a pretty big push to keep autonomy, right? Now, also, if his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. Um, well, before I get into my opinion on this, because my opinion doesn't really matter so much, let's go to the passage guide. All right. Da, 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 da. Faith Life Study Bible. Let's see what it has to say. This phrase Here we go. His wife will go out with him. A slave's master incurred responsibility for the slave's wife and children during his term of servitude. So again, it's purchasing somebody's time, like a very, very dedicated job. Um, it's not really, what we in modern America would think of as slavery. But 21:4 will belong to her master. This phrase might refer to a practice known in other ancient Near Eastern cultures in which a slave's master could use him as a means to produce houseborn slaves. Hmm. So let's deep dive into this a little more. So first reference is Genesis 14:14. What do we got? When Abraham heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Okay. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Come on. Where's my bottom list? There we go. Tabs. Go back. Thank you. All right. Genesis 17:13. Both he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money shall surely be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Then finally, Leviticus 22:11. But if a priest buys a slave as his property for money, then the slave may eat of it, and if anyone born in his house may eat of his food. Um, so that's not too terribly off from what I was saying. This is treating it more like each household is kind of almost like a like its own little mini city or village where you're brought into this community to work, where you're fed, you're watered, you have shelter, you have basically all the necessities of life, where you're basically working in that capacity for your keep. So you're not out, paying rent or buying your own land or anything like that. Um, but you do have, if you have nothing, servitude is a way to have something, right? Where this is, I don't personally, I don't believe that when it talks about buying a Hebrew slave, I don't think this is talking about like a market, right? Where, hey, we rounded up a bunch of these people, and then you're going to go in and you're going to pick one, and then that one's going to come home with you for 6 years and do whatever you want them to. It's more of a case of, hey, basically, I don't have a family. I'm looking for work. I need work. I have no land. I have no property. I have no means to sustain myself. Will anybody basically buy me for the next 6 years so that way I can work and set myself up, you know, um, work and live and all that stuff. As well as, I love my master, which is the whole part we're getting to here, where what he's really saying is I love my home, right? So if somebody works for 6 years as a part of your um, family, right, and they decide, nope, I don't want that. I'm going to go start my own. I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to go do something else, right? They can just do that. That's not a problem. You've basically given them 6 years to not have to worry about food or anything else, and not to encourage side hustles, but they were probably learning skills, right? They were gaining knowledge, they were gaining functionality as people, um, where it's almost like a really long temp agency, so to speak. Now, again, I'm I'm not totally 100% accurate on this, and I'm not going to pretend like everything in there was totally pretty all the time, right? But the concept that God is setting up is, more of a, I don't want to say rehabilitation kind of system, but it's similar to that, right? Where, say somebody comes out of prison, they have nothing, right? There are programs out there where they can go, they can stay at a house, their food's covered, their bills are covered, they're working, and as they work, they pay, bills at the house. They live there for some time. Usually there's some sort of contract. You got to stay clean, you got to stay sober, that kind of thing. But we have practices like this today, and they're much closer, I think, personally, to what this slave servitude thing is in the Bible than any sort of free human market, which is just, I don't see any context for anything like that. Um, so we're going to get out of here. We're going to go back over and let's just see what Matthew Henry has to say about chapter 21. So here's what he says. The laws in this chapter relate to the fifth and sixth commandments, and though they differ from our times and customs, nor are they binding on us, yet they explain the moral law and the rules of natural justice. The servant in the state of servitude was an emblem of that state of bondage to sin, Satan, and the law, which man is brought into by robbing God of his glory by the transgression of his precepts. Likewise, in being made free, he was an emblem of that liberty wherewith Christ, the Son of God, makes free from bondage his people, who are free indeed and made so freely, without money and without price of free grace. I think this is one of those instances where the made so freely without money and without price of free grace, um, I kind of see it, but I'm personally I'm not super on board with that one myself. But make your own conclusions out of this. So here we go, chapter 21, and this is in the JFB. The rules for regulating procedure of judges and magistrates and decisions of cases. What? In the trials of criminals, the government of the Israelites being a theocracy, those public authorities were the servants of the divine sovereign. And what? Oh, okay. I'm following now. So, should he, however, have married a female slave, she and the children after the husband's liberation remain the master's property, and if through attachment to his family the Hebrew chose to forfeit his privilege and abide as he was, a formal process was gone through in a public court and a brand of servitude stamped on his ear. Psalm 46. I think this is interesting. So this should be, yeah. So I always thought this was cool. In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted, but you have given me an open ear. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. So this is David talking, and the word here actually is plural, I believe, two ears. And well, let's see. No, that won't work. Okay, well, that's all right. Um, and David's basically saying, I'm so sold as a servant, you can pierce both my ears. I'm set to serve God, which I just think is cool. But anyway, yeah, so that was a very long treatise on servanthood and slavery in the Bible. Um, Again, I think it really is important that, right after the Ten Commandments and the setting up of the altar, which I think, you know, we have obedience, right? We have worship, and these are the two main issues here. So obedience, worship, and then finally, love others. And in that context is how we see Exodus laid out, which I just think is really cool. Um, Particularly those who maybe are in a more dependent role, right? So how do we treat people who aren't necessarily our equal, so to speak, but how do we treat those who have more need than we do? And I think it's really important that, the first thing is repent and obey. Um, then worship me, have no other gods before me. And then right after, we set up, one altar to one true God, one purpose. This is, the foundation of which you will build. We immediately jump to, but those less fortunate than us, we still show them love, and that love is a huge um, building block here. And I'm really starting to get into the weeds a bit, so I should probably stay away before I start getting too preachy on it. But I just personally, I just thought that was really cool how that opened up like that. So anyway, Exodus 34:6. So we're going to jump to Exodus 34:6. Now, this is after we have broken uh, the old tablets, as well as right after when Moses asks if he can see the Lord. So in 34, we see the Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablet, which you broke. He is not pulling any punches. Be ready by the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on top of the mountain. No one shall come up with you, and let no one be seen throughout all the mountain. Let no flocks or herds graze opposite that mountain. So Moses cut 2 tablets. He rose early in the morning on Mount Sinai. The Lord commanded and took in his hand 2 tablets of stone. The Lord descended in a cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Which, again, he opens up with, whoops, still on eraser, steadfast love. You know, he's merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. So Moses just broke, he just broke their loyalty. So God gives him terms of loyalty, and he doesn't make it very far before they're broken. Um, Again, just our version of quote unquote love for God just can't hold up to God's steadfast love when we see just how quickly this quote unquote steadfast love we have, not that it's ever called that, it's never called that, right? But if it's a joint obligation, right, and we don't share that joint obligation, right? We should, um, but we never see our steadfast love for God, at least in the first 5 books, which is, just the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. And Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth and worshipped. And he said, if now I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, please let the Lord go in the midst of us, for it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and sin, and take us for your inheritance. I never noticed that before. This is curiosity. Okay, worship. What do we got? He bowed down. Okay, word info. Let's pop this. Oh, I'm not even going to begin to try and pronounce that. So that word right there uh, is the word for worship. It's really just bowed down, and man, it is There's not much to it. Curious. So hmm, Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth and bowed down. I'm not sure I learned anything there. Um, I'll have to do another dive on that word later. So this is, what is chapter 34? Yeah, okay. So Exodus 34, 8, right? 8? Yeah. Um, yeah, that's a weird word to use there. There's got to be something more to it, but that will derail us, I think, completely if I start chasing down that rabbit hole. So we're not going to do that. Um, so we did 34.6 and 34.7. We'll let it load up. It's just going to take a second here. But I think we've done good so far. Um, you know, we didn't cover many. We're only one, two, three, four, five in. Uh, no, no, no. Go back. I'm just going to do this again. Search. There we go. Okay. So, all right, that gets us through all of Exodus. X. Oh, goodness. You know what I'm trying to say. Exodus. So we're going to jump now to Leviticus. Now, there are only two instances in Leviticus. It is not much, but we are going to jump to Leviticus chapter 19. Oh boy. So, Leviticus 19. Let's just read through the chapter. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and you shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves any god of cast metal. I am the Lord your God. We're going to add Leviticus. Nope, that's an eraser. We're going to add Leviticus 19 because I just want to, well, let's just do it. So let's go here. Uh, can I do passage guide? And I should be able to. No, so it's not here. All right, so it's not that. But what I am looking for is the word study. I guess we got to do it one word at a time. So, no. There we go. Oh, how handy is that? So, we got that. Lord, Yahweh, right? Your God, Elohim. So he's just going to keep repeating, I am the Lord your God. So I guess we don't need to look into that necessarily. But that was just interesting. I thought there'd be more there. I don't know. It pinged me as interesting. But anyway, when you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, you shall offer it so that you may be accepted. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, or on the day after. And anything left over until the third day shall be burned up with fire. If it is eaten at all on the third day, it is tainted, it will not be accepted. And everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from his people. 3 days, Jesus in the grave, risen on the third day. I don't know. But something to, yeah, I guess we're just going to throw it right back up there. we're going through all of Leviticus 19 at some point because that's it just keeps getting more interesting. So love your neighbor as yourself. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest, and you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave for them the poor. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. You shall not steal, you shall not deal falsely, you shall not lie to one another, you shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your Lord God. Profane the name of your God, I am the Lord. You shall not oppress your neighbor or rob him. The wages of a hired worker shall not remain with you all night until the morning. You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. You shall not do injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So, and then we got to go down to 34. So, verse 19, you shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your cattle breed with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed, nor shall you wear a garment of cloth made of two kinds of material. If a man lies sexually with a woman who is a slave assigned to another man and not yet ransomed or given her freedom, a distinction shall be made. They shall not be put to death because she was not free, but he shall bring his compensation to the Lord, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, a ram for a guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering before the Lord for a sin that he has committed, and he shall be forgiven for the sin that he has committed. Yeah, we're just gonna go through all of 19 later. When you come into the land and plant any kind of tree for food, then you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you, it must not be eaten. And in the fourth year all its fruit shall be holy, an offering to praise the Lord. But in the fifth year you may eat of its fruit, to increase its yield for you. I am the Lord your God. You shall not eat any flesh with the blood in it. You shall not interpret omens or tell fortunes. You shall not round off the hair on your temples, nor mar the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead, or tattoo yourselves. I am the Lord. Do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution, and the land become full of depravity. You shall keep my Sabbath, and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. Do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. You shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man, and you shall fear your God. I am the Lord. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. You shall do no wrong in judgment, in measures of length, or weight, or quantity. You shall have just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin. Those are also measuring tools, or ephah. I think it's ephah, but they were how you measured like flour and grain and stuff. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and you shall observe all my statutes and all my rules and do them. I am the Lord. So that's all of Leviticus. Pretty much summed up in one chapter, actually, funnily enough. But seriously, that's all of the love references in Leviticus. So we are going to jump into Numbers. Now, Numbers, um, there's only a couple of more, so we might actually stop after Numbers this week because Deuteronomy is a beast in and of itself. It is quite something. So I think we're just going to do these three in Numbers here, and then we'll call it. So Numbers 14, 18. Okay, so uh, here we have, let's go up to context, right? So we have the report of the spies. So this is where uh, uh, they sent, who was it? Caleb and, oh shoot, who was it? Uh, so they sent spies into Canaan just to see what was in the land. And then Caleb comes back, and he's the one who has faith. The rest of the spies said, absolutely not. That's just not going to happen. So then, after they say, we're not doing this, all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. We do not fear them. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones, but the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me? And how long will they not believe in me in spite of all the signs that I have done among them? I will strike them with pestilence and disinherit them, and I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. And Moses intercedes for the people. But Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear of it, for you brought up this people in your might from among them. And then they will tell the inhabitants of this land, they have heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of this people. For you, O Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands over them, and you go before them, in a pillar of cloud by day and in a pillar of fire by night. Now if you kill this people as one man, then the nations who have heard your fame will say, it is because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land that he swore to give them, that he has killed them in the wilderness. And now, please let the power of the Lord be great, as you have promised, saying, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation. Please pardon the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt until now. What a bold statement that is. So if you didn't catch it, the context here, just wow. So what's happening here is Moses was told by God, right, that, I am slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but I will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. So we read this earlier, right, in Exodus. And so then, um, when God threatens the people of Israel, right, uh, to say that they'll die in the, when the Israelites are asking, are we going to die in the wilderness? Moses says, hey, you can't kill us because then you'll look weak. Wasn't it you who said the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love? And I'm 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 a little shocked that Moses is kind of throwing his words back at him in his face, which is just a wild statement to make. But the important part of all this, right, is that um, Moses does understand the meaning of steadfast love. Moses says, you are steadfast. You do love us. You will not destroy us. Um, it's a bit of a bold choice to really take God's own words and throw them back in his face while begging for your people's lives. But that's what he does. And God is faithful, right? So God is loyal. God is faithful. He made a promise, and his steadfast love will hold through. Um, but I would not necessarily want to be Moses in this situation, because if we keep reading, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have yet put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despise me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Um, Something that I notice here specifically is that um, Moses would be included in that. Uh, None of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times, and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their fathers, and none of those who despise me shall see it. Um, it's questionable whether Moses would fit into this or not. Um, I'm not sure that Moses despises God, but right, I think we can all agree, especially since we just covered that Moses had to go back and get a new set of tablets, that he didn't necessarily uh, uh, obey his voice either, right? So, I know that later on Moses is told that he won't be entering the promised land as well, specifically for striking a rock when God asks him to basically to touch this rock, and Moses lashes out and smacks the rock, and God says, "You're not going to, for this, you're not going to enter the promised land." But I think um, that really might have already always been the plan. I don't know. Again, that's just something interesting there. So that covers both of Numbers 14. Now, this is the strange one, Numbers 24:5. So this is the one that's lovely and not love. So, like I said, Logos will pick up words like lovely. And so I'm imagining that of the over 700 references of love, we're going to see a lot of lovely in here, particularly probably in the Psalms. Um, Song of Solomon maybe will probably have a fair amount. I feel like Psalms is going to take 6 months to get through alone, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I do want to go over this one just because it brings up an interesting point. So, this is the story of Balaam. Now, um, we'll just start reading at 22. Then the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan and at Jericho. And Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was in great dread of the people because they were many. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel. So this is like Moab is a city, right? Moab isn't a person, it's a city. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will now lick up all that is around us as the ox licks up the grass of the field." So Balak, the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Beor, at Pethor. So we're going to tap this little note right here, which is going to take us to Deuteronomy 23. And one who came out of it because they hired against you Balaam, son of Beor, from of Mesopotamia to curse you. So clearly not an Israelite. I think this is super, 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 super important, right? A lot of times these days, right? We kind of have in our head as modern Christians this idea that, you had a whole world and then you had one people group and God was with that one people group, but everyone else didn't even know God existed, right? That God only showed himself to Israel, right? And so we ask, we were in a Bible study this morning, Sunday school before church, and we were talking about, people ask, well, how can God be so unforgiving to the people around the Israelites, right? Like why were the Amalekites and the Amorites and the Midianites, right? Why were they all facing judgment from God? Um, and so I think, we really have to break that idea that God was only with one people group. So, you know, it kind of, in the way that it's been simply presented over the years, that, God really was with one people. They had the right vision. They had the revelation from God, and that everybody else was just kind of left behind, right? Um, but here we have Balaam, way over here, son of Beor, which is near the river in the land of the people of Ammah, right? Who I'm just going to double check, but I believe these are the Amalekites. Um, da, 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 da. Dropped in some late dialects. No, perhaps not. This is his kin. Um, but I do think this is a people group. Um, I think it's describing a people group. It'd be hard for me to prove it, but that's fine. That's neither here nor there. The important part here is Balaam is way over here, and he knows God, right? Like he is a prophet of God, and he's not just some random guy, but like he had a relationship with the Lord way over here, not related to Israel in any way, shape, or form, but he knows God. Um, and we have Melchizedek, right? The priest of Salem in Genesis, where Abraham's talking, right? Like we see it's not just Abraham that has interactions with God, right? Other people around the world all know God. Um, and so I think if we take into account just how forgiving and steadfast God's love is for Israel, and yet they still face punishments, right? He still let them be overtaken. He still let them be conquered multiple times, right? He let the kingdom be divided, all this stuff. When we see a lot of this violence in the Old Testament, right, where we say, well, how can a just God pick one people, and punish everybody else? Let's be realistic here and realize that we have other people who are around the Israelites that are also knowing God. So while God may not have a covenant with them, he still expects obedience from them. As we'll see later in the story, uh, Balaam is under absolutely no delusions whatsoever that he can go against the voice of God, right? So he repeatedly meets God and throughout this whole story, and is forced to just acknowledge, like, I I must do what the Lord God tells me to do. Right now, he doesn't stay like that, and he comes up with a trick to not curse them, but to get Israel to mess themselves up with prostitution and that kind of thing. Um, but he is a servant of God and has nothing to do with Israel. I think that's really just something so critical that's often overlooked is just how many people, especially, when I was growing up, it really felt like, it was like Israel were the good guys and everybody else was the bad guys and God was on the good guys' side. And that's just not true. Israel was a chosen people to bring about redemption in Jesus Christ later in the Bible, but there were people who, certainly not perfect, but there were other people all around the world who served God, um, as we'll see with this story. So I'm not going to read the whole story, but it says, in verse 9, and God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? And Balaam said to God, Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, behold, a people has come out of Egypt, and it covers the face of the earth. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I shall be able to fight against them and drive them out. And God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them, you shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So the princes of Moab rose and returned. Once again, Balak sent more princes, more in number and more honorable than these. So he sends an even bigger dignitary set. And Balaam says, um, you know, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. Um, so he has no lineage in Israel, right? But he acknowledges and serves the Lord. Certainly no better than an Israelite, but he at least acknowledges and serves the Lord. So we go through the story of where Balaam is riding his donkey, and so this is just a neat little note here. The angel of the Lord stands in the road, and the donkey keeps turning to the side to avoid walking into the angel of the Lord. And Balaam has no idea. Um, the donkey turns around, and God opens the mouth of the donkey to tell him, this isn't fair. Why are you beating me? You know, I wouldn't have done this unless it was for your own good. You can trust me, basically. And so after that, the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand. Um, so he almost has a road to Damascus experience of a sort, and he meets the angel of the Lord on the road, and he goes through and he's giving different prophecies, right? How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I behold him. Behold, a people dwelling alone and not counting itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number the fourth part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like this. We carry on to his second one. Rise, Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? Behold, I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot revoke it. He has not beheld misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen the trouble in Israel. The Lord their God is with them, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt, and is for them like the horns. Let's see if I can unhighlight that, because that's delete. Cool. Okay. And is for them like the horns of the wild ox. For there is no enchantment against Jacob, no divination against Israel. Now it shall be said of Jacob and Israel, what has God wrought? Behold, a people, as a lioness it rises up, and as a lion it lifts its head. It does not lay down until it has devoured the prey and drunk the blood of the slain. Then we come to the third oracle. He keeps trying to get him to curse Israel, and Balaam says, the Spirit of God came upon him, and he took up his discourse and said, the oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is opened, the oracle of him who hears the word of God, the words of God, who sees the vision of the Almighty falling down with his eyes uncovered. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel, like palm groves that stretch afar, like gardens beside a river, like aloes that the Lord has planted, like cedar trees beside the waters. Water shall flow from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt, and is for him like the horns of a wild ox. He shall eat up the nations, his adversaries, and shall break their bones in pieces and pierce them through with his arrows. He crouched, he lay down like a lion, and like a lioness, who will rouse him up? Blessed are those who bless you, and cursed are those who curse you. And then finally, one more time, he gets up and he says something really interesting. The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, the oracle of the man whose eye is open, the oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty falling down with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab, and break down all the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be dispossessed. Seir also, his enemies, shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly, and one from Jacob shall exercise dominion and destroy the survivors of cities. Then he looked on Amalek and took up his discourse and said, Amalek was the first among the nations, but its end is utter destruction. I never noticed that before. Okay, so we're in, I think this is 25, right? No, we're still in 24. Yeah, we're still in 24. Okay. So we are at, this is Numbers, right? Yeah. Numbers 24, 20. I want to look into Amalek was the first among nations, but its end is utter destruction. And he looked on the Kenite and took up his discord and said, enduring is your dwelling place, and your nest is set in the rock. Nevertheless, Cain shall be burned when Asher takes you away captive. And he took up his discourse and said, alas, who shall live when God does this? But ships shall come from Kittim, and shall afflict Asher and Eber, and he too shall come to utter destruction. And Balaam rose and went back to his place, and Balak also went his way. Yeah, so that's the study. I know that was a bit long-winded for uh, a sentence as how lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your encampments, O Israel. But I do think a lot of this stuff is really important. I think this story is really important for us to go through. Um, and I think it's, hmm, I almost want to say that the people around had no love for God, but it was not ignorance. I think it's important to show that we had a people here who knew, who understood, and yet um, disobeyed God. That we look at Balak, and um, whenever Balak is asking Balaam, not to get those two confused, but when Balak is asking Balaam, to curse this people that comes up, and uh, you know, Balaam is very emphatic. He is extremely emphatic that he can't do that, you know. Um, and Balak just doesn't listen. Balak has no regard. But he isn't confused. We don't hear Balak say, I don't understand. Who is this Lord? Who is this God that you keep talking about? Balak knows exactly who he is. He doesn't care. Um, and I think that's a really crucial point to when we start looking at, violence in the Old Testament and, how can a God who loves, right? So we hear this a lot, right? Is how can a God who loves be so violent? How can a God who is, if God is love, then God of the Old Testament cannot be my God. I don't know if anyone else has ever heard any arguments like this. I hear them all the time. Um, and I think in the middle of this study of love, ironically, the one, the one place that wasn't actually a uh, an instance of quote unquote love is perhaps one of the most telling of instances about God's love, right? That these people had time and time and time again. I mean, how many times? What, five prophecies? Four prophecies. Um, Balaam speaks. It's uh, second, third, and then final. Yeah. So, whoop, four times alone, speaking to a prophet, Balak rejects God, and that's just in one instance of one time. How far must their hearts have been from God to see the power of God, to understand that there's the power of God, to know that Balaam is a man who can bless and curse through the power of God, right? So he called him there to curse them because Balaam knew God. So he believed that Balaam had, some sort of spiritual deity connection, right? That it was powerful, that it held power, it held substance, and yet when he got the answer he didn't want, he just walked away. He rejected the answer over and over and over again. When he called a man not just to curse somebody, right? It'd be different if he called like some sort of like witch doctor type figure to come in and lay a curse, and then God speaks to this witch doctor and says, you know, um, I'm not going to let you curse them, yada yada. You have no power over me. Your curses don't work, right? But that's not what it says. What it says is that Balaam, if we go up here back into 22, right? Back in chapter 22, da, 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 da. Here we go, here we go, here we go. In verse 11, um, nope, nope, nope. Yeah, 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 yeah. Go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. So then they come back, and in uh, verse 18, but Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, um, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. Right? So we're not talking about. Oh, I keep erasing that Numbers 24 thing. Um, let's just. Ooh, Numbers 24, 20. There, we'll stop doing that. Um, Balaam is a prophet of God. He is a servant of God. He is openly speaking of God. He is openly displaying the power of God. He is openly serving God. He knows about altars. He knows about how to offer sacrifice. He knows, everything he needs to know about being a prophet, right? So we see a lot of parallels between Balaam and other prophets. And I would refuse to say that Balaam was not a true, genuine prophet. He was not a false prophet, who came under another god. But we're talking about the same God, right? If the Lord Balaam's God is the one that blessed Israel, then it's the same God. So how powerful is that we have a man outside of Israel who is set up as a prophet of God, follows God, Yahweh, right? Is a servant of Yahweh, and then has built a reputation as a servant of Yahweh to know that he could deliver blessings and cursings like any other prophet, and to still ignore him, which we see other people do, and we see that through the rest of the Bible, right? But when we see God deliver justice, right, and love, right, and we say, well, how can God love, Israel more than all the others? He's favoritism. At least in some way, somewhere along the line, right? Israel made a covenant with God. So Israel made a covenant to love God. Other people clearly also had opportunities to do that, whether that was in an individual sense or as a whole city. I just think it never happened. I don't think the opportunity wasn't there. I just think they never took it. You know, I think that if a whole city full of people, just like Balaam, came together and said, we are going to serve the Lord our God, just like Salem, right, in Genesis, and they were going to serve the Lord their God, then God would have honored them as a city just like he did Israel. But all that to say, so we've gone through all the verses so far, up until we get into Deuteronomy. So if we edit, first I'll get rid of that. Oh, come on. It doesn't like the pencil. And then let's just go just Deuteronomy, done, range title, Deuteronomy. So we will have 25 more. We have to, well, 28 results and 25 verses. So we'll have 25 more verses to go through on the next one. Um, I hope this has blessed you. I hope that um, you found something in it that interests you. I think I'm going to do a set this week on all of these, and I'll probably in the middle of the week or something do one of these videos that'll just cover what I go through whenever I do this random search. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but we'll do something with it. But if you made it this far, I know it's very long. I'm sorry for that. If you've stuck it out, I appreciate you very much, and I hope you stay blessed. Thank you.